David has to leave a little early, so we'll let him talk now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and for the opportunity to be here, and good morning. And I love the reference I think Roger was making to improved cook stoves to reduce indoor air pollution. I was reflecting on, could it possibly be 45 years ago when I was a Peace Corps volunteer in India working on smokeless chulas to reduce indoor air pollution. So good to see the topic getting attention once again, actually. Just a word about Save the Children, for those of you who don't know. We're actually a very large and I would say complex organization, and we are made up of 30 members and work in 120 countries around the world. So it is complex, and yet we all seek to work together, as it were, with a shared vision of working along the development to humanitarian continuum to address particularly the needs of children. And we do that through an international network of offices that are in member countries, but then primarily through our country-level offices where much of the implementation takes place. We've made a commitment, along with many other organizations, to ending preventable maternal, newborn, and child deaths, and have made that a global priority in recent years. So why we partner? I think this is repeating what a number of others have said, but it is for a variety of reasons. First of all, to generate and use evidence to help what we would call leverage change in global and national policy, and practice. To complement skills that we sometimes have and sometimes don't have in-house that are important to actually bringing about that change. Achieving scale and therefore greater impact. Working on our own, there's relatively little that we can accomplish. And then obviously leveraging resources which we need to leverage in order to both generate and use that evidence for better policies and programs. I want to say a little bit about the various partners that we have, and I'm going to say maybe a little bit more about challenges than some of my colleagues have said, because every partner has its partnership, I should say, has its pluses and minuses. So I'm going to mention a few. But before I do, I want to make the point that I am not speaking, you'll not see in this list, actually, one of our most important partners, who are the local non-governmental organizations that we work with in most countries around the world. And I'm not neglecting them because those organizations and the communities we work with are unimportant, but because another colleague, I believe Susan Ray Ross, is going to speak to that issue a little later in the day. So with the U.S. government, I would just say first, well, before I say that, there is really nothing that we do that we don't do with and through partners. We simply couldn't do what we do if we weren't able to form and nurture and really move forward in a variety of partnerships. So obviously the U.S. government is a very important partner of ours, and we not only receive funding, but we also help to influence, we think, at times, what the U.S. government decides to do and how they decide to do it. We're also an advocate, frankly, in the advocacy, the policy and advocacy work that we do, both within the U.S. and abroad, in helping to position, as it were, U.S. government development assistance as an important national priority in the U.S. It is, for us, the U.S. anyway, Save the Children U.S., the largest single source of funding that we receive. So some of the challenges, which won't surprise most of you, are the sometimes shifting priorities and our need to adapt, often more quickly than we might like. The relatively short project cycles. I spent a career in USAID before I went to Save the Children, And there was always something magical, but nobody quite knew why, about 5 years to bring about significant change. And it didn't always happen that way. So 5 years can begin to move you down a pathway, but it seldom gets you to where you ultimately want to be. Again, I saw this from the inside and now from the outside. There is a tendency, for better or worse, sometimes to micromanage partners. It's not that there isn't useful advice and counsel and guidance that is provided by the donor, for sure. But I think I found in my experience that at times I felt like I was a whole lot smarter than when I was inside government than I was when I left. I don't know how that happened, but in any case, I think sometimes the government can fail to appreciate what they actually have in those partnerships that they work with. And occasionally, there might be unreasonable demands put on a partner, like a very short timeline for something that actually takes longer to achieve, as I mentioned, but also hoping for and expecting that you would somehow be able to measure impact on an annual basis. That, for most of what we do, is quite difficult to accomplish. We work very closely with public sector institutions in developing countries, and there are many reasons for doing that, but a couple to highlight are that we simply can't leverage change and impact at scale if we don't work with and through those institutions. They are, in many countries where we work, they represent the largest delivery platform for programs that reach the populations that we're most seeking to reach. And obviously, over time, if there isn't that engagement, if there isn't that kind of partnership, you don't build the kind of host government commitment that's needed to ensure sustainability. And we all have the stories of what it takes to accomplish that and how important it is to the work that we do. The challenge is for us that our role is often catalytic, and therefore much of what needs to be done and that we have agreed we would do together is, in fact, not within our manageable interest. In other words, if we were doing direct implementation, we would have much more control over what was done and how it was done and whether or not that impact was achieved. Obviously, in this kind of a partnership, we don't have that kind of control for sure, or even influence in many cases. So we have to be seen as highly credible, and establishing that credibility is challenging, and for good reason. And there's oftentimes skepticism on the part of our host country counterparts, also for good reason, about whether or not the advice or the support or the ideas that we might be seeking to promote are in fact those that will lead to change and impact at scale, and particularly in those settings. Academic institutions, we haven't mentioned them in the conversation today, or at least less so, but we have many partnerships with academic institutions, both in the U.S. and developing countries. And again, there are some very explicit reasons for that. We need to partner in order to really design and implement what we would consider to be high quality and highly credible research activities. It enhances the visibility of the research and the results that are generated through that research. It also makes it more likely that they will get into the peer-reviewed, published literature. And while that may not mean on the ground that, someone working at the district level will receive his monthly or weekly copy of the Lancet, but it will ensure that people who are in policy-making positions oftentimes do have access to the latest evidence-based information on work that we're doing together. One of the challenges that we've experienced, and I think we've made some progress with a number of our partners over the years, is that we sometimes define success a little differently. Those of you who have been in academia probably this would resonate with you, but certainly for some of our partners in academia, if you've got a well-designed research activity, it was implemented on schedule and reasonably well, and you got the results published in a peer-reviewed journal, your work is done. And I think for us, that is a necessary but far from sufficient condition. We really want to see that evidence as important as it is, translated into changes in policy and practice. This isn't always the case, but sometimes we find that those who are the academic partners may not engage the ultimate users of that research to the extent that's needed. And by that I mean in defining the research issue that needs to be addressed or the question that we're seeking to answer, and actually in participating and monitoring and subsequently using what's done and learned through that research that we've done together. And so we've really worked with our academic partners to try to ensure that that kind of thinking and that kind of collaboration takes place at each step along the way. Corporate partners, much has been said about corporate partners this morning. There are great opportunities here. I think we are just beginning to, as an organization, tap some of those opportunities. Other NGOs, I think, are doing the same. But certainly there are skills that we do not have, marketing and communications being among them, the global presence, innovative ideas. The private sector does think in different ways than we often do about important global issues. And that kind of innovative thinking is really critical to being successful in addressing the longer term issues that are important. Funding is also important too, obviously, and particularly those in our organization who spend their time fundraising. But I don't actually see that as the primary motivation of our corporate partnerships, to tell you the truth. There are many other reasons, as I said. I think there's growing corporate interest in partnerships, and one of the things that we've noticed, in addition to CSR and shared value, which you have talked about, is both the willingness and the desire of employees in the corporate sector to actually engage as partners in the work that we do. And I know others on the panel, I'm sure, can know much more about this than me, but we know that employees often say one of the reasons that they joined a particular company or want to remain with that company is that kind of opportunity. Some of the challenges, again, not a surprise to those in the room, I'm sure, but matching our interests is sometimes challenging. And that is about both what we want to do, where we want to do it, the form of assistance that makes sense in that particular setting can be challenging. There is a vetting process that we go through with corporate partners that also can be challenging. And that's important for a variety of reasons, but among them, we're really uncomfortable, I guess I would say, with the idea of marketing a particular product. Now, that's not to say that it doesn't happen or it isn't important, and we understand why that's important to our corporate partners. But we do have to be cautious about how we go about doing that, and particularly to make sure that we don't form partnerships that undermine what may be policy and program priorities for us. And I don't know, the one that seems to always surface, it seems to me, is the whole issue of marketing of breast milk substitutes, which in my 17 years with Save the Children, I think comes up about 3 times a year at least. So we like to have longer-term partnerships. One-off kinds of contributions are really not what we're looking for. They're time-consuming. The return on investment for us is actually not so good. So we we really would like to have longer-term and trusted partnerships. And finally, foundations. I think I may be the only one who's mentioned foundations as partners, am I? In any case, they have become and are very, very important to us as a partner for the work we do, and it's been very important to see the growth in interest on the part of a number of foundations in investing in health and nutrition. I'd say generally speaking, they've been less bureaucratic, our foundation partners, than some others, and especially the USG, but it hasn't always been the case, quite honestly. Some of our foundation partners are much less experienced or uncertain about really what they want and need. And this can lead to frustrations, I think, on both sides, as both sides sort out what would be, in fact, a meaningful partnership. And in some cases, a reluctance to finance what we would call implementation costs. So in other words, investing in innovation and investing in catalytic kind of activities is important. In some cases, we need to go further down that pathway, and we need actually funding to cover some of the implementation costs. So just a couple of observations on what makes for a successful partnership. Certainly shared values and a shared strategic and programmatic alignment is important. Clarity regarding expectations, and I think this is where we sometimes start down a road with very different ideas about the partnership, the expected outcomes, who needs to do what, and so forth. And getting that clear, I think, as clear as we can from the outset, and then revisiting if it doesn't seem like it's as clear as it ought to be is really important. Trust, and you don't build this in a day, but over time, so that trust should enable us to be really open and honest with each other, because it turns out everything that we set out to do together doesn't go perfectly. And yet there may be a tendency on our part to characterize things as going better than they really are for some obvious reasons. And so we really need to be able to have an open and honest dialogue about what works and what doesn't. We've always appreciated the Gates Foundation urging us to document and share failures. And I would say, because we learn from failure, I'd say that's still a work in progress on our end, still a little reluctant to really document and share what we haven't achieved, but it's important and something that we take seriously. Respect is at many levels, and it includes respect for the beneficiaries that we're seeking to reach. So it's not just between our organization and a partner. It's about who it is we're seeking to reach, that we engage in the work that we do together in a way that demonstrates that respect. A willingness to acknowledge and share the limelight. We sometimes refer to it as leading from behind, as it were. Some people or some within our organization, I think, would like us at times to be perhaps, what was the term? Jettisoning humility, I think, was what one person said. And I think it creates a little conflict, as you can imagine, when, on the one hand, we're trying to bring about change by leading from behind, and on the other hand, there's a feeling that, gee, we ought to be getting more visibility for the work we're doing. So it's a challenge, but important to, I think, building trusting and effective partnerships. So why are NGOs often attractive partners? I would just say, in some cases, it is because of our brand. Save the Children is well known and well respected, and there are benefits to be derived from having a partnership with us. It's our global presence and reputation, being in 120 countries. we would hope it's also for our technical expertise. And the fact that we've been in countries sometimes 20, 30, 40 years, we have not only developed a knowledge of the country, but also of we form relationships with local partners and with our counterparts, particularly in government and within the non-governmental community. And I think for academic institutions, oftentimes there's an interest in finding a partner that actually has an operational presence on the ground so that you can collectively design, implement a research activity. You don't have to set it up from scratch because we're there with that kind of presence. So with those not so few words, that's what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I ask you just to stay for a few minutes?
Sure.
And I know you have to leave a little early, but I wondered if there were any particular questions for David. Before he leaves. Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Lovely. Okay, that's great. Thank you. I have 100 questions, so I'm trying to bite my tongue. Carl, thank you very much.